A small 12-seat aircraft tilted sharply as it battled mountain turbulence, just as the pilot slumped forward in his chair. With a storm closing in fast, they had roughly 20 minutes to either land safely or face a crash. Now, the unimaginable had happened. A jittery IT specialist, whose only flight hours came from behind a screen, had to take over the controls. Could a lifetime of simulated flying prepare someone to save real people in real danger? Hi everyone, welcome to Life Tales. Let's dive in. Ethan Cole's knuckles were bone white as he gripped the armrest, the commuter plane jostling violently through yet another burst of turbulence. Through the window, he watched clouds pile up far faster than any forecast had warned. What was supposed to be a short, easy 90-minute flight from Denver to Cedar Ridge, a quiet mountain town where his sister's wedding was set for tomorrow, was starting to feel anything but routine. Flying had always made Ethan uneasy, which made his favorite weekend hobby more than a little ironic. At his IT office, his coworkers often poked fun at his obsession. While they unwound with typical video games, Ethan immersed himself in advanced flight simulator software. He'd invested thousands, replica yokes, throttle controls, multiple displays, even those obscure foot pedals pilots used. Honestly, his apartment looked more like a cockpit than a bachelor pad. Then the plane dropped unexpectedly, and Ethan's stomach went with it. He inhaled sharply and tried to distract himself by recalling aircraft specs. They were aboard a Beechcraft King Air 350, a twin-engine turboprop that cruised around 300 miles per hour with a ceiling of 35,000 feet. He knew it well. He'd virtually flown this exact plane more times than he could count. "Looks like we're picking up some weather," came Captain Foster's voice over the intercom. His tone was steady and relaxed, the kind of calm that comes from 3 decades in the cockpit. "We'll climb a bit to try and smooth things out, but expect a bumpy ride for the next few minutes." Ethan glanced around the small cabin. Just 7 passengers today, 2 business guys locked into their laptops, an older couple somehow sleeping through the shaking, a mother entertaining her daughter with a tablet, and directly across from him, Dr. Anna Reyes. She'd mentioned during boarding that she was returning from a medical conference in Denver. About 20 minutes into the flight, Ethan picked up on something subtle but troubling, a change in the engine's tone. Most passengers would never notice. But after thousands of hours spent wearing high-end headphones in his sim rig, Ethan knew exactly how a King Air was supposed to sound. And this wasn't it. The aircraft eased into a slow, deliberate turn. It wasn't drastic enough to scream danger, but it was definitely not part of the original flight plan. The intercom popped again. "This is Captain Foster," came the familiar voice. "The weather system ahead is evolving more rapidly than expected. I'm going to alter our course slightly south to bypass the worst of it. Should only add about 15 minutes to the trip." Ethan instinctively opened the weather radar app on his phone, something he always did out of habit. What he saw made his chest tighten. The storm front wasn't just growing, it was forming a thick wall of violent weather stretching straight across their path. The southern diversion was logical, but the speed at which the system was developing? That worried him. There was a real chance they wouldn't outrun it. What Ethan couldn't know, what none of them could, was that in just 10 minutes, all those countless simulator sessions would go from hobby to lifeline. Another jolt rocked the aircraft, sending it lurching downward before it steadied again. Passengers gasped. The seatbelt sign, still lit since takeoff, pinged once more as a sharp reminder. Across the aisle, the mother tightened her daughter's belt and whispered reassurances. But what wasn't reassuring was the silence coming from the cockpit. In turbulence like this, the pilot would normally hop on the intercom, offer updates, calm nerves. Instead, nothing. Just another sharper turn. Then the cockpit door creaked open. Captain Foster stepped out, his face pale and strained, one hand gripping the doorframe for balance. "Is there," he started weakly, "is there anyone on board with flying experience? Any kind at all?" The cabin froze. He swayed slightly, his left hand suddenly clutching his chest. Dr. Reyes shot up from her seat. "I'm a doctor," she said quickly, hurrying toward him. At that exact moment, Foster's knees gave out. She caught him just in time, lowering him gently to the narrow aisle floor. "Medical emergency," she called to the others. "Help me get him lying flat." Without thinking, Ethan unbuckled and moved in to assist, helping Dr. Reyes position the unconscious pilot. The 2 businessmen stood frozen, unsure what to do. The elderly couple looked on, horrified. The mother held her daughter tightly, turning the little girl's face away. "Classic signs of a heart attack," Dr. Reyes said, checking the pilot's neck for a pulse. "His heartbeat's irregular. Skin's clammy. She glanced up at the cockpit door, which had now swung fully open. Is there a co-pilot? Ethan stepped over to check. The seat was empty. No, he said, throat suddenly dry as sandpaper. These short regional flights usually only have one pilot. It's just him. Dr. Reyes's face tightened as the implications sank in. Is there anyone here with any flight experience? She called out to the cabin. Even small planes? The businessmen shook their heads. The elderly couple looked like they might cry. The mother began quietly praying. Ethan hesitated, every nerve in his body telling him not to speak, but he pushed through the fear. I've never flown an actual plane, he said slowly. But I have thousands of hours on flight simulators. This exact model, even? All eyes turned toward him. Wait, video games? One businessman asked, clearly skeptical. It's not a game, Ethan replied firmly. It's a simulator. Professional-grade software. Real systems. Real procedures. Emergency protocols, too. Dr. Reyes locked eyes with him, still tending to the captain. Well, that might be the only option we've got. The autopilot's keeping things stable, but it won't land the plane. I know, Ethan said softly. Another burst of turbulence rattled the plane, overhead bins shaking. Through the open cockpit, Ethan could see the control surfaces subtly adjusting, autopilot still working. But through the windshield, a wall of dark clouds was closing in fast. And none of them realized yet that storm was about to become the least of their problems. I need to contact air traffic control, Ethan said suddenly, a surprising calm creeping into his voice. We need to inform them right away. Dr. Reyes nodded. I'll stay with the captain. He's stable for now, but we need to get him medical care as soon as possible. Ethan's legs felt like lead as he stepped into the cockpit. The layout was instantly familiar, yet overwhelmingly real. The same gauges, same panels he'd spent years studying on screens, now lit up in front of him and terrifyingly actual. He lowered himself into the pilot's seat and got to work. Altitude, 11,500 feet. Airspeed, 230 knots. Heading, 143 degrees. Autopilot, engaged. Fuel, sufficient. Radar, showing a monstrous storm dead ahead. His hand trembled as he reached for the radio. He struggled to remember the exact phrasing, but the protocol was buried in muscle memory. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Cedar Ridge approach, this is Flight 5226. Medical emergency. Pilot incapacitated. I'm a passenger attempting to fly the aircraft. Request immediate assistance. For one heart-stopping moment, only static crackled in reply. Then came a response. Flight 5226, this is Cedar Ridge approach. We've received your mayday. Can you provide your current status and position? Ethan exhaled, steadying his breath. Cedar Ridge approach, this is Flight 5226. Our pilot appears to have suffered a heart attack. A doctor on board is attending to him. I'm a passenger with only simulator training, no actual flight time. We're flying at 11,500 feet, heading 143, roughly 40 miles northwest of Cedar Ridge. Autopilot is engaged. There's a major storm system directly ahead. We need guidance for an emergency landing. There was a brief silence on the line. Ethan could almost sense the controller weighing the situation, processing every detail he'd just shared. Flight 5226, copy that. Stand by while we alert dispatch and coordinate with emergency services. Ethan glanced at the panel again. Everything still looked stable for now, but the storm clouds were stacking up fast. They'd have to descend soon if they hoped to avoid the heart of it. The radio crackled to life again. Flight 5226, this is Cedar Ridge approach. We've connected with a pilot who will walk you through this. Patching him in now. A calm, confident voice came on the line. Flight 5226, this is Chris Dalton, Senior Flight Instructor. I understand you've flown this aircraft model in simulators. Is that correct? Ethan replied quickly. Yes, that's right. I've spent hundreds of hours with this exact aircraft, the King Air 350. Excellent, Dalton said. That's a great start. Now, the autopilot is keeping the plane steady, but we need to change course to avoid the worst of this weather. Can you locate the heading bug on your flight director? Ethan's eyes locked on it right away. Got it, he confirmed. Good. Turn it to heading 190. That should take you south around the worst of the storm cells. Ethan rotated the dial gently, adjusting the heading. The aircraft began a smooth, controlled turn. Heading 190 confirmed, he said. His tone was calmer now, more focused. This was familiar ground, receiving instructions, making adjustments. Just like in his home setup. Dr. Reyes reappeared at the cockpit doorway. How are we doing? She asked softly. So far, so good, Ethan answered. What about the captain? He's hanging in, but it's serious. He's conscious but absolutely not in any shape to fly. We need to get him to a hospital as fast as possible. Ethan gave a short nod. We're rerouting around the storm. Cedar Ridge is still the nearest airport with emergency services. Dalton came back on the radio. The storm's escalating faster than we anticipated. We need to get you on the ground sooner than planned. Cedar Ridge Municipal is prepping for an emergency landing. I'll guide you step by step. Ethan checked the map on the navigation display. At their current speed, Cedar Ridge was still 35 minutes out. That's too far, Dalton replied. There's a smaller field closer to your location, Bearcliff Airfield. It's about 12 minutes from your current heading. The runway's only 5,200 feet, but that's enough for a King Air if you handle the approach correctly. Ethan instantly recognized the name. He'd flown practice landings at Bearcliff in his simulator many times. Tight approach surrounded by mountainous terrain, only the basics on the ground, no frills. Used mostly by private pilots and the occasional cargo run. Bearcliff already has emergency crews standing by, Dalton added. And a medevac team can get your pilot to a trauma center faster than if you continued on to Cedar Ridge. Understood. Diverting to Bearcliff, Ethan confirmed. He reprogrammed the flight plan, locking in the new heading. The display adjusted, showing a shorter, more urgent route. What Ethan didn't realize was that his toughest challenge wasn't behind him, it was right ahead. And he'd soon be facing it without any help at all. Flight 5226 will need to begin your descent shortly, Dalton instructed. But before that, I need you to disengage autopilot and take over manually for a brief test, just to be sure you can handle the aircraft. Ethan's mouth went dry. This was it, the point of no return. Simulators were precise, yes, but they couldn't replicate the physical feel of turbulence tugging at real wings or the subtle resistance in real flight controls. Copy that, Ethan responded, his voice tight with focus. He found the autopilot disconnect on the control yoke exactly where it was in his sim and pressed it. A chime warned him autopilot was off, and instantly the aircraft came alive in his hands. No more automatic corrections. The turbulence pushed, and this time the plane pushed back. The plane jolted slightly. Ethan responded with quick corrections. The controls were heavier, more sluggish than he was used to, but the principles were the same. I have control, he said, surprised at how confidently the words came out. He made a few careful inputs, adjusting pitch and roll, keeping the wings level and the nose on course. Excellent, said Dalton, sounding noticeably more at ease. Your control is smooth and deliberate. Let's go ahead and re-engage autopilot and start planning for approach. Ethan switched the autopilot back on. There was a strange emptiness when the aircraft took over again, but he understood. He'd just shown he could fly. Now he had to prove he could land. Bearcliff was only 10 minutes out now, but the storm was closing in fast. Flight 5226, begin descent to 8,500 feet, Dalton said. And reduce speed to 180 knots. Ethan adjusted the controls as instructed. The aircraft eased into a controlled descent. His ears popped as cabin pressure changed with the drop in altitude. Then, flash! A blinding bolt of lightning exploded across the sky in front of them. Crack! A thunderous roar followed. Multiple warning tones erupted in the cockpit. We've taken a lightning strike. Ethan shouted into the mic, getting multiple system warnings. Stay calm, Dalton's voice replied quickly. What systems are throwing alerts? Ethan scanned the instrument panel. Radio and navigation warnings, radars flickering, he reported. That's likely damage to the antenna on top of the aircraft, Dalton explained. It may have been hit, but your core instruments, altitude, heading, speed should still be working. Can you confirm those? Ethan did a quick check. Everything essential looks good. Instruments are still reading accurately. Good. We're still tracking your transponder, but your radio may start cutting in and out. If we lose contact, proceed with the Bearcliff approach as planned. Emergency services are waiting for you. And as if on cue, the static started. Dalton's voice came through again, this time distorted and fragmented. Maintain, heading, visual, runway, crosswinds. Then silence. Cedar Ridge approach, do you read me? Ethan tried again, his voice tightening with urgency. But there was no reply. Just silence. Chris Dalton, are you there? He asked one last time. Only static answered him. A cold, heavy feeling settled deep in Ethan's chest. It was official now, he was completely on his own. Back in the safety of his apartment, this would be the point where he'd pause the simulation, take a deep breath, maybe even restart the scenario. But this wasn't a game. This was real life. There was no pause button here. The storm was closing in fast. The runway was getting closer. And 8 people, himself included, were counting on what he did in the next few minutes. Dr. Reyes reappeared at the cockpit doorway, gripping the frame tightly as the turbulence worsened. "What happened?" she asked, concern written all over her face. "I heard thunder. We got hit by lightning," Ethan explained, doing his best to sound calm. "It knocked out our comms. I can't reach ATC anymore. But we're still heading for Bearcliff. About 7 minutes out." She gave a quiet nod, her expression grim. "The captain's going downhill. His color's fading and his breathing's getting shallow. He needs advanced medical help right away." Ethan met her gaze and nodded. "Tell the others to brace themselves. We've got to punch through some rough weather before we can reach the runway." As they descended into the lower cloud layer, visibility vanished. Thick mist swallowed the cockpit windows and the aircraft began shaking violently. Overhead compartments rattled, loose items bounced. Ethan took the autopilot offline again. In conditions like these, he needed full manual control. His own hands on the controls gave him quicker reactions to the chaos around them. He eased back on the throttle, dropping airspeed, and began his approach pattern, relying entirely on his instruments. All that simulator practice flying blind, with no visuals, this was where it paid off. He locked into rhythm, scanning the display in sequence: airspeed, artificial horizon, heading, vertical speed, again and again. At 7,000 feet, the clouds finally parted just enough. And there it was, tree-covered mountains encircling a narrow valley. In the middle of it all, a single strip of pavement. Bearcliff Airfield. Flashing emergency lights lined the runway edges, blinking through the sheets of rain. "I've got the runway in sight," Ethan said aloud, forgetting for a moment that no one could hear him anymore. The NAV display showed he was aligned, but a strong crosswind was pushing the plane sideways. Ethan worked the controls with constant, careful pressure, making small, steady corrections to fight the gusts trying to push them off course. At 6,500 feet, just 700 above ground, another complication hit. The rain intensified, coming down in heavy torrents. It slammed against the windshield, stealing visibility all over again. He could barely make out the runway now. Time to rely on his gauges again, with only the occasional visual confirmation. 1 mile to threshold, he muttered, walking himself through the procedure. Speeds at 140 knots. Descending at 700 feet per minute. A sudden gust shoved the aircraft hard. Ethan dropped the landing gear. Click, click, click. 3 green lights, gear locked. Flaps were already in landing position. He eased back on the throttle, slowing to 120 knots. The runway came back into view briefly, then disappeared behind another curtain of rain. Eyes on the instruments. Steady hands. No panic. 500 feet, he said under his breath. Still on glide slope. Another violent gust slammed the plane again, shifting their path. Correcting, he muttered, nudging the yoke. "Come on, hold it." At 400 feet, the runway reappeared, still not centered, but they were closer. 300 feet. Airspeed down to 110 knots. Another gust. Ethan countered again, muscles tense. 200 feet. Rain streaked across the glass, distorting everything. 100 feet. Begin flare, he told himself. Ethan gently pulled back on the yoke, slowing their descent, preparing for touchdown. But suddenly a massive gust slammed them broadside. The plane jolted violently left. Ethan reacted without thinking, right rudder, right aileron, but he overcompensated. The aircraft banked to the right, dangerously tipping a wing toward the ground. "Hold it steady," he growled, gritting his teeth as he fought to regain control. 50 feet. They were directly over the runway now. 20 feet. The plane leveled just in time. Then, thump. The right main gear hit hard. Thump. Left gear followed. Slam. The nose gear dropped and smacked the tarmac. Ethan immediately activated reverse thrust. Brakes engaged. But something felt wrong. The right pedal was soft, barely responding. The aircraft began to drift right. "Come on, stay with me," Ethan shouted, pressing harder, adjusting his inputs. Bearcliff's runway wasn't long. Just 5,200 feet. And they were burning through it quickly. Ethan pumped the brakes. The left responded sharply. The right still weak. The plane kept sliding toward the runway's edge. He had a split second to decide. He let go of both brakes. Then used the rudder to swing them back toward center. And then, Ethan slammed the left brake only, using it to swing the nose back toward the center line. They were still moving too fast. "Brace for overrun," he yelled back to the passengers. Loud enough for everyone to hear. The last of the paved runway flew beneath them. The speedometer read 40 knots. Then, grass. The King Air jolted violently as its wheels left the tarmac and hit the uneven overrun. The propellers screamed in full reverse. The landing gear bounced hard through mud and ruts. Each impact sent brutal shocks through the fuselage, shaking every bolt and frame joint. And then, silence. The aircraft skidded to a stop, just 50 yards short of the trees. The only sound left was the soft hum of the idling engines. Then Dr. Reyes's voice broke the quiet. "Is everyone okay? Any injuries?" Responses came slowly, nervous voices, shaky murmurs, but no screams. No one was hurt, no blood, just disbelief. They'd made it. Ethan sat frozen, hands still clenched around the yoke. They were down. They were alive. And somehow against every odd he had landed the plane. 3 days later, Ethan found himself sitting stiffly in a small conference room inside Cedar Ridge Medical Center. Captain Foster had survived emergency surgery and was now recovering. The airline had arranged a private meeting at the captain's own request. The door opened. A nurse wheeled in Captain Foster. He still looked pale, but his eyes were clear and focused. Right behind him walked Dr. Reyes and 2 formally dressed airline reps. "Mr. Cole," Foster began, his voice quieter than usual but still strong. "I wanted to see you before they discharge me tomorrow." Ethan shifted awkwardly in his seat. "How are you holding up, Captain?" Foster gave a tired smile. "A lot better than I would have been if you weren't on that plane." He motioned toward a tablet on the table beside him. "I went over the flight data. And let me tell you, I've been flying for 3 decades and I'm honestly not sure I could have landed that King Air under those same conditions." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "I made a ton of mistakes." Foster nodded. "Oh, you definitely did," he said bluntly, then grinned. "Your crosswind corrections were sloppy. You came in hot. The flare was too late. And your braking? Let's just say it wasn't textbook." Ethan's face flushed red, heat crawling up his neck. But Foster continued, his tone shifting. "You stayed calm. You took responsibility when no one else could. And you landed a plane safely with 0 real-world experience. That's something most trained pilots wouldn't have managed." He shook his head slowly, still processing it himself. Then one of the airline representatives stepped forward. "Mr. Cole," she began, "on behalf of the company, we'd like to offer you lifetime free travel on all our domestic and international flights as a thank you." Ethan's jaw dropped slightly. "That's wow. I don't even know what to say. Thank you." "There's more," Foster added. "I've already spoken with our chief flight instructor. If you're open to it, he wants to offer you a fully funded spot in our pilot training program." Ethan stared, stunned. You want me to become a real pilot? You already proved you can fly in one of the toughest situations imaginable," Foster replied. "Now just imagine what you could do with actual training." That same evening, Ethan stood quietly at the observation deck at Cedar Ridge Airport. He watched as planes climbed effortlessly into the golden dusk sky. Down on the runway, parked near one of the service hangars, was the very aircraft he had landed, the King Air from Bear Cliff. It had already been inspected, repaired, and cleared for flight. It looked just like any other aircraft on the tarmac, but to Ethan it was so much more than that. His phone buzzed over and over with messages and mentions. The story had spread like wildfire. "Flight Sim Hero lands real plane" was now a global headline. Media outlets flooded his inbox. Interview requests, talk shows, podcasts. But for now, Ethan had turned them all down. He hadn't done it for fame. He looked up again as a regional jet roared off the runway, its landing gear folding away beneath its wings as it climbed into the clouds. And for the very first time, Ethan didn't see it through the eyes of a nervous flyer, or even as a flight simulator junkie. He saw it as someone who had held real controls in his hands, as someone who had made real decisions in real time, to save real lives. No matter what path he chose, whether he entered flight school, took a new job, or simply returned to his everyday life, Ethan knew one thing for sure. All those hours at his computer weren't just a hobby. They weren't a waste of time. They were training. They were preparation. And when that life-defining moment finally arrived, he was ready. Enjoyed this story? Tap the like button and subscribe to Life Tales for more incredible, true-to-life stories. And don't miss the next video already waiting for you on screen. It's one you'll want to see. We'll catch you in the next one.